Executive Suite with WPRI.com reporter Ted Nesi.
If there's one thing Rhode Islanders agree on these days, it's this: the state's economy is in dismal shape. Whether it's sky-high unemployment or incomes that lag Massachusetts and Connecticut, most metrics show Rhode Island falling behind. With government economic development efforts tarnished by 38 studios, others are stepping in now to see what can be done. Last week, the Rhode Island Foundation gathered more than 300 private sector leaders for a two-day event called Make It Happen Rhode Island. Their task? Chart a path forward for the state and map the fastest way to get there. This week on Executive Suite, a post-game roundup on how Rhode Island can make it happen. Welcome to Executive Suite. I'm Ted Nesi. Joined this week with a panel. We're going to talk about the Make It Happen event and what they heard there. And I want to introduce my guests. We have Lisa Shore. She is the Vice President of Marketing at PC Troubleshooters in Warwick, along with Scott Jones. He's CEO of GroovePin in Smithfield. And on this side of me, we have Jonathan Duffy, President of the PR firm Duffy & Shanley and Chairman of the Greater Providence Chamber of Commerce. And Neil Steinberg, he's President and CEO of the Rhode Island Foundation. And I want to thank you all for joining me. And before we start, I should acknowledge the Rhode Island Foundation sponsors this program. Thank you for that. But I decide what goes on air, and this was news, and which is why we're talking about it today. So I want to start with you, Neil, to get folks up to speed on what Make It Happen was. It got a lot of attention. They've probably heard about it, but just in case, you had about 300 or so private sector leaders gather for a day at the Rhode Island Convention Center. Why did you decide to hold this event?
We decided to hold it, I think, for two reasons. One was inspiration and the other was frustration. The inspiration was that we all know that despite tough times, Rhode Island is a great place. It has great assets. It has many businesses that have been thriving for many years. It has emerging businesses, colleges, universities. But the frustration is we sit here after a few years of still having the second highest unemployment, 60,000 people unemployed, and we didn't see a lot of action. So we got people together, a representative group from different areas, different sectors, big business, small business, startups, academic, healthcare, to talk about what could be done.
And you gave sort of a stump speech at the event. I heard some of that in there. But, what was your message to these people to get them, thinking, we hear all the bad news. I mentioned some of it off the top. What did you say to people to sort of get them in the right frame of mind?
Well, what we basically did was set out some ground rules, that it was going to be positive, it was going to be realistic but positive, it was going to be looking forward, not backwards. And the main thing was to try and take rhetoric to action. We've all been part of panels and discussions and forums and studies and reports on shelves. That this was the time that we needed to take action, that the private sector needed to step up and do that. And, there's no they out there. The them is us. It's all of us working together to push forward and develop a plan and real action steps to take the economy forward.
John, you're chairman of the Chamber of Commerce. I want to know what you thought of the event and also the vibe and what you've been hearing both from there and since then.
I was absolutely thrilled with the event for two reasons. One, the level of optimism and energy was great versus we got away from all the negative dialogue that was going on in the community, and it was just really positive, and it felt good to be with so many like-minded individuals. But what I was really excited about was really it demonstrated the real opportunity Rhode Island has. You could not have gotten that group together in any other state. Okay, the leaders from higher ed, from healthcare, from business, the private sector all came together. There was no one missing. There was no big gap.
And there were some heavy hitters there. I saw Brown President Christina Paxson was there. People, Arnie Bromberg, the head of Benny's. People we don't always see at these events.
President of URI. People were committed to and engaged, and that's really what was so good. So anytime you get together every important segment of the private sector and get them participating like that, you can change things. And that was my takeaway. I'm very optimistic.
So turning to this side of the table, I want to first, Lisa, very briefly, what do you do at PC Troubleshooters?
So PC Troubleshooters acts like an IT department for small businesses. We are celebrating our 20th anniversary this year. My role is to, as the Vice President of Marketing, is to really enhance the brand of PC Troubleshooters, help out with strategy, have training for my team, So attending Make It Happen was impactful for me.
And that was my question. What you get this invitation or you read about it, you decide to go. Why did you decide to go and what did you get out of it?
Oh, I was thrilled to get invited, first of all, so thank you. I got out of it a huge sense of optimism. We're a small business. There's 15 of us on staff, but we rely on Rhode Island. We rely on Rhode Island businesses for us to grow, and we really rely on all the different agencies that we are a part of in order for us to have training for our team. So I knew that this would be a great opportunity for me to make some connections that I otherwise would not have made.
Okay, and Scott, first tell us about GroovePin down in Smithfield. What do you do down there?
GroovePin is a surviving Rhode Island manufacturer. We've been around for 88 years, but in the last 3 years, out of the recession, we took an effort to improve our business and engage our employees and move forward. It was a process that really has, over the course of 3 years, learning from local Rhode Island businesses. We've halved our lead times, we've halved our setup times, and we're on a 20% growth path as a result of implementing lean processes.
I want to detour on that just a little. I mean, everyone wonders, how does we know how much manufacturing lost, and for the survivors, what's the key to that? How are you still here in 2012?
In 2009, we were down by 50%, and we knew we had to do something positive with our folks surviving in the business. So we engaged them. We went to a company in Rhode Island, Vibeco, and visited.
Carl Watson's company.
Saw the energy in the folks there shipping same day, next day, and took that lesson home. It took us a year and a half of hard work, but we focused on an energized team. We looked at how we could pull ideas together, and most of those ideas were in the room. And finally, a process. And we looked for things that we could do within a year, hard-hitting, and make steps forward. And our people had that smile that we saw at Vibeco within a year. After 2 years, we began doing tours to show other people how they might learn from the process.
So, well, it sounds like you're pretty busy then in Smithfield. So why did you decide to take a day and a half out of your day job to come to Make It Happen?
I was really energized to be part of the process. You know, we learned so much from businesses in Rhode Island to start with. Coming together with a group of 300 energized leaders, there's no opportunity like that. And I can't imagine in my experience where I came from in New Jersey or California that we could have that same kind of opportunity. It's a real benefit to our size in Rhode Island. To be in that room with 300 people that were really looking for an answer was really exciting.
Neil, you made a very conscious decision not to invite elected officials to Make It Happen. We can all think of reasons we don't want to spend any time with politicians, but why did you decide to do that?
Yeah, it's a good question. We get a lot, and it's not really a hidden agenda. It was very practical. First of all, there's a lot of politicians, and if you invite a couple, everybody else wants to come. It's also an election year, and candidly, this was not a place for election speeches and things like that. And the last thing is we really did believe it was incumbent upon the private sector to step up. We had talked to elected officials beforehand, so we met with the governor and other officers and with Speaker Fox and Senate President Paiva-Weed to tell them what we were doing and to assure them that this was to help Rhode Island, it was to get a voice from the private sector, and at the appropriate time when we have something we need or want support, we will come to them. So it was not an us versus them, it was really private sector step up and then come to the table. And
one last question, I'll put it to John before we go to a break. Is this a sign the private sector has given up on a constructive role for government in economic development?
No, I don't think that at all, but I do believe the private sector leads and the government will follow good programs and good initiatives. The private sector is, that's what we do. We build jobs, we build revenue. It's what we do. It's not exactly what the government does. They have other things going on. So I think it's incumbent on the private sector to lead. And I think that's what this was all about.
All right, we have to take a break. When we come back, we'll talk about some of the big takeaways and the things that came up a lot in the discussion at Make It Happen. We'll be right back. Stick with us on Executive Suite. Welcome back to Executive Suite. I'm Ted Nisi. This week, a roundtable on Make It Happen Rhode Island, the big high-profile event that brought together private sector leaders last weekend. My roundtable this week, we have Neil Steinberg, President and CEO of the Rhode Island Foundation, Jonathan Duffy, President of PR firm Duffy & Shanley and Chairman of the Providence Chamber of Commerce, Lisa Shore, Vice President of Marketing at PC Troubleshooters in Warwick, and Scott Jones, CEO of GroovePin in Smithfield. And Scott, I want to go to you on this. I want to have each of you weigh in, and I'll start with you, Scott, on a big takeaway from Make It Happen, something concrete that you heard about a lot or that interested you. For people who weren't in the room, what's something that you found really interesting there?
Well, one of the compelling things throughout the 2 days was the attitude of just do it. And we were not there just to talk and to think about, but really how do you translate ideas from the thinkers to the doers. And we saw in the midst of 2 days a group of medical device industry folks get together and decide they were going to start to meet. They weren't waiting for a direction, they weren't waiting for an agenda, they weren't waiting for somebody to tell them what to do. They were going to start meeting right away. And that was really exciting because I saw that as a pilot for what we might do with other industries. Similar to that, there was a lot of talk in a number of the forums about this intersection between business and colleges and universities in Rhode Island. And it really comes down to, I call it, an aspect of our seed capital. You know, we're conscious about access to capital in a money sense, but we've got kids graduating from universities and leaving the state. So how do we create an intersection, a street intersection, where they can come and be involved and stay in the state?
Now, you raise a good question with that. Did you hear any good ideas for answering it?
I heard a number of possible responses to that, some that were built around the notion of the Rhode Island Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship, a so-called RICE 2, and also a lot of talk about creative ways to create internships and manage internships, maybe a clearinghouse for internships within the state, and then maybe even on the tax side, maybe an incentive to business owners for hiring and keeping grads in the state for a period of 2 years.
Lisa, I know that was something you mentioned to me too. We were talking by email before this. What was something that stuck out to you at the event?
The biggest, I attended the Skills Gap session, which was a very lively discussion. And it's an interesting discussion because the unemployment rate is so high. However, in my sector, we're looking for very highly skilled technology workforce. And trying to find that kind of high-level technician for small businesses, technology is no longer just a part of, a hobby. It's now integrated into their businesses, and it's a requirement and a huge demand in order for them to have productivity and lean processes. And so when you are looking for that kind of staff and those kinds of employees, it's a huge challenge. So dovetailing on what you were saying, Scott, partnering with the colleges is an amazing idea because too many of them leave, and too many college grads leave, and so we need to find a way to partner with them in a more substantial way and provide them incentives and show them that there are viable companies and good quality paying companies in this state. And so for PC Troubleshooters, we already do several internships with area technical schools like New England Tech and MTTI, and we're very proud of that. And we've hired many of our interns. And so expanding upon that, and from myself, taking a little bit of ownership in this path and actually meeting some of the, continue to connect with the college presidents and the staff that I met at Make It Happen will only help me expand my horizons.
Now we're always talking unemployment still very high in Rhode Island, which can make people surprised. And I want to bring this to you too, Scott, but that there's any problem hiring anybody, because it seems like, well, with all these people at 60,000 out of work, why can't we find someone? But do you find at PC Troubleshooters you can't hire the people you need sometimes?
I do. What we end up doing is if we do hire someone from a technical school, we end up having to spend money on training them. And we invest in their time, and which is a beautiful thing anyway. We don't have a problem with that, but the demand for the work and the complexity of the jobs that we have now, we really need the higher skills. So we do have a challenge trying to find the right person, the right fit.
Yeah. I want to build on Lisa's comment to say that that's a role where internships can help develop soft skills as well as some of the industry-specific technical skills. But beyond that, when we look at areas that develop degree attainment, the higher number of bachelors within a region, it's not only about the college kids. When those bachelor candidates work, they bring up employment for people who don't have college degrees as well. There's a correlation between bachelor's degrees and employment. There's a correlation between bachelor's degrees and enterprise creation as well. They tend to follow together.
John, how about you? What was a big takeaway for you from Make It Happen?
One of the things I was struck by was how pragmatic people were, in that there was nobody trying to solve 60,000 jobs, right? And I think a lot of the ideas were very practical and can be implemented within a year, which I think is a good use of everybody's time. For me, there was a great conversation around the whole entrepreneurship community, which we put a lot of energy into try to build, and there's a lot of buzz around it. But what it really lacks is formality. So there was a lot of talk about creating a hub for these people, both on the web but also physically. And Scott mentioned it, and that's where RISE 2.0 comes in. So RISE is Rhode Island Center for Innovation and Entrepreneurship, which is going through a evolution right now, and trying to get it funded. And I left there feeling there's no doubt this thing will be funded and it will be up and running and better than ever very soon.
What's very soon mean?
I'd say this year.
Okay. Neil,
And
how
it's
about...
September.
All right. Yeah, that's right. That's
So
right.
very soon.
I can tell by the commercials we're running now. Neil, how about you?
Thanks, Ted. First of all, I just want to say that there were hundreds and hundreds of ideas that are still being sorted through. So we're kind of picking some of our favorites, but there's a lot there. I'm going to use the time to do two. One is a little bigger picture, but marketing the state. That was a really big one that you can talk about the warts and the nits and the gnats, but this was a group that was proud of, as many people are. We've had people been writing in about what we have here from an education point of view, from a manufacturing point of view, from a natural resource point of view, and getting together finally a story that we can all tell that's not just about the beaches and the restaurants, although they're great and part of the tourism industry, but a lot more than that. And the need to sell it internally before we go externally. That we have a self-esteem issue.
Right. Yeah.
I think the key there is, creating the statewide narrative that's very positive,
Right.
hitting on the right issues, but creating a million cheerleaders.
Yeah.
Right? Instead, we don't have a million cheerleaders right now, and these you start inside and then you go outside. And I think that's one of the crucial things that everybody took away.
Yeah, the other quick thing was kind of the other end, and Scott was referencing it. There is still manufacturing in this state, and it may be advanced manufacturing compared to what it was, 50 years ago. But one of the ideas that came out was the TACO model. And for those who don't know, John Hazen White, who owns TACO, invested a lot of money to expand his manufacturing facility in Cranston and hired and trained 50 new employees last year. Pretty basic. More people can do that.
All right. Well, John Hazen White will actually be a guest here on Executive Suite in a few weeks. So now here's a good commercial for that. We're going to have to take a break. When we come back, we'll show you my favorite part of Make It Happen Rhode Island. Stick with us. You're watching Executive Suite. Now. Welcome back to Executive Suite. I'm Ted Nisi. This week we're doing a roundtable on Make It Happen Rhode Island. My roundtable is Neil Steinberg, President and CEO of the Rhode Island Foundation, Jonathan Duffy of the Greater Providence Chamber of Commerce, and Duffy and Shanley, Lisa Shore of PC Troubleshooters, and Scott Jones of GroovePin. Neil, could you hold up? This was one of the coolest things I thought when I was down there reporting on this. These were sort of storyboards that professional cartoonists came and they drew sort of what was being discussed, right? And this was the marketing session that you were in. While we have that on screen, John, what did you hear in that session? What was the discussion about marketing Rhode Island?
Well, as you can see by the discussion bubble, wide-ranging thoughts, and people just had a lot of energy, and you can tell by the artist ran out of space, which I thought just summed it up really well, because there were a lot of great ideas. And the moderator, and Neil needs to be thanked for this, they did a great job recruiting the facilitators, because trying to facilitate this group of 300 leaders and type A personalities was not the easiest thing to do. And they just did a great job of making sure that the sessions went smoothly and everybody was heard. And so Neil's group needs a lot of credit for that, because you can imagine if it was dominated by somebody, it really would have hurt some people's experiences.
Now, I'm struck by the optimism. I saw it there too, and it is striking when we do have some bad news in the state and some problems and things like that. Scott, I want to ask you this first. You mentioned 50% down in the recession. We know how hard manufacturing was hit. I could see why you guys would be feeling a little glum, but you sound like you're on board with the optimism about Rhode Island too. I've heard from manufacturers who complain about things. Why do you see room for optimism in this state right now?
Well, part of it is we've decided to build a life here, and that's core. There's a lot here to offer for on an ongoing basis for life here, but we've really taken energy from our group, and that's something I didn't expect 2.5 years ago when we went into this process. Seeing people really engage at work, seeing them enjoy the process, and when Neil talked about a positive narrative, it really was, we took stock of what we were good at, what we were not good at, and then as we moved forward, we celebrated the improvements. It wasn't that we were perfect, it wasn't that we were the best, but we celebrated those improvements as we went forward, and that's a real kick day to day.
Lisa, you're down in Warwick. Why? You and I know your husband as well. You guys have made your life here too. Why? What left you feeling optimistic about Rhode Island from this?
Rhode Island is an amazing state. We've built our family, our home in Rhode Island, and we built our business here. We built our business learning the business community. We service a wide variety of clients, and they're just very passionate about this state. There's a lot of good going on in this state, from the medical community to the arts community, and we've learned that, we've discovered that, and we are so proud to be a part of it. So really, there's a very strong sense of pride in Rhode Island and amongst Rhode Islanders. And so we've always, as a business, had optimism here. So I'm thrilled to be a part of somewhere where I can actually share my enthusiasm and feed off of it, and hopefully people will feed off of my enthusiasm and want to jump on my Rhode Island bandwagon.
Neil, do you plan to make this a yearly event? We're going to make it happen every year in Rhode Island. What's the plan for going forward?
We were pretty specific. The only way we will do this next year is if we can come back and say, made it happen. That's the only way. This is it. This is the start. The engine's running. People trying things, groups already getting together, plans being made. But we've got 12 months to really jumpstart this, and we'll come back if we can all agree that things are going positively.
I know did you end up making, how's the foundation sort of doing follow-up, if it's the foundation doing it? Are you making action items? Was there sort of, what's the takeaway?
The first thing is really just compiling everything. And so not only these graphic representations, but we've got notes and notes and notes. And so we'll be putting up very publicly for everybody to see all the ideas. And before we get to the point of, we'll look for themes, we'll look for common areas. But if somebody sees number 84 and says, hey, that one looks good to me, go do it. If there are groups that get together right now, nobody needs to wait. There's no gatekeeper, there's no permission. But we will look for big themes. We'll get people together and talk about some things. If we need legislative support or support from the governor, we'll go do that.
All right, that's all the time we have this week on Executive Suite. I want to thank my roundtable for coming in and discussing Make It Happen with us this week. It was an interesting event. You can find more information on the Rhode Island Foundation's website. I think that's rifoundation.org.
Yes.
That's how I say, know my sponsor well. And thank you for joining me here on MyRI TV for Executive Suite. We'll be back next week and every week. Have a good weekend. All right, we're going to be on screen together for a little while. Bye.